Hi, I'm Jill Foster, and welcome to your next PB&J card class. This week on the blog, we'll be focusing on the technique of spot coloring. And in today's card, I'll be using Penny Black Flower Gallery and Music Background. And here's a look at the card we'll be creating today. We'll begin by taking this Clear Set Flower Gallery by Penny Black, and I'm laying that down and picking it up onto my acrylic block, and I'm going to stamp this onto Penny Black Mix and Match cardstock using VersaFine black ink. And I'm going to be stamping this multiple times onto this background. So I'm starting with the main image that I'll be adding the spot coloring to, and then I'll stamp around that to fill in the rest of the space. And as I stamp, I'm sort of turning that stamp, twisting it around so that I get a different look, and then it looks more like a background stamp than an individual stamp. And of course, each time I'm re-inking the stamp as well, so I get a nice crisp impression. Now I'm going to do some coloring with the white gel pen. This is my favorite gel pen, and when I color with this video is sped up, but when you're coloring with a gel pen, often if you color just a little bit slower than you normally would, it keeps the ink coming out nice and fluidly. So I'm just going to color in this image, being careful to leave the black of the stamped part of the image and color around that. And here you can see I've finished that on the entire image, leaving one image left to do my spot coloring on. Now I'm coloring this in using Faber-Castell Art Grip colored pencils. And this first layer that I'm applying is with the golden yellow, and I'm using a pretty light pressure as I color this in. And I'm going to get the other flower as well. Same thing, using a light pressure as I color that in. Not being too worried about filling in the entire image completely. Now I'm taking an orange red and I'm coloring right over the top, pressing a little bit harder than I did with that yellow color, and just adding some darker shading right on top, closest to the center of the flower. And I'm also getting some of those petals that are tucked behind and adding a little bit of shading to those as well. And I'll do the same here on the small flower. Now I'm going to go back. This is the original golden yellow that we started with, but now this time I'm coloring over the entire petal with a heavy pressure. And this blends those two colors together and leaves you with a nice vibrant yellow as well. Now I'll follow the same process to color in the leaves, so I'm starting with a lighter green and coloring the leaves, this time using a pretty light pressure to apply that color. Next I'll go in with a darker green and a little bit heavier pressure to add some darker shading, sort of along the veins of the leaf and closest to the flower. And now I'll go back with that original lighter green color over the top of the entire thing with a heavy pressure. Now that that's colored, I'm ready to add some distress ink. And what this does is it just tones down that white of the gel pen. So this is brushed corduroy. I'm using the foam applicator pad. I'm starting off of the edge and working my way on over the top of those flowers. And that sort of gives you a ghost sort of image and helps them fade into the background. Next I'm going to use the color Gathered Twigs, but any darker brown would work. And I'm going over the top again of the flowers and working my way towards the center, but not all the way in. Next, I'm going to add a stamped background, so I'm inking Penny Black Music Note background with gathered twigs. And then I want to remove some of the ink, mainly where that colored flower image is. So I'm just eyeballing that with the paper and dabbing some of that off with a baby wipe. And then I'll lay my piece directly onto the background stamp, hold with one hand and rub with the other. And you'll see there that just adds one more layer to that background. Now I want to darken up those edges a little bit more, so I'm going back in with gathered twigs. And I like to do that sometimes after I've done the background stamping because I know how much color on the background I can add with the Distress ink without losing the background stamping that I've already done. So sometimes I go back in after I've stamped the background. Now I'm taking an edge distressing tool and I'm just rubbing that along the edges to give this an aged effect. And then I'm going to go back in and darken that using the gathered twigs. So where that white core is showing through, I'm just dabbing that with the gathered twigs Distress ink. Now I want to fold down those corners, so on the two corners where I'm going to be folding it down, I'm just adding some Distress ink to the back so that when I roll those forward, it's not bright white. So it sort of blends into the background that we already have. Now this is Penny Black Mix and Match cardstock, which I just want to add a light layer of gathered twigs around the edges. And we're ready now to begin assembling. So I'm going to take my stamped piece and adhere that to the green Mix and Match cardstock. Now this was die cut using Spellbinders Labels 23. And I'm going to ink this piece with Distress ink as well. So this is Wild Honey. Starting off of the edge of the cardstock and working my way on in a circular motion. And I only need to get the edges because I'll be covering up the center. And you'll see here I'm re-inking often so that I get a nice rich color, and I'm actually going to go around this a couple of times, so a couple of layers, so it's a nice rich color. And then just to tone that down a little bit and tie it into the rest of the piece, this is that gathered twigs, and this is a very light pressure with my hand, just going over the top, toning it down just a little bit. Now we'll take our stamped piece and adhere this to the die cut label. And then here's how I assemble my shaped card. So I've cut another piece the exact same size using the Spellbinders die cut. I've scored it along the top and applied adhesive only above that score line. I'll press that down and you'll see that you have a nice hinge to open your card. And here's a look at the finished card. All I've done is add a sentiment, some twine, and a few pearls. Thanks so much for watching. For details and more information, visit www.pennyblackink.com.